Okay, let's jump right into this explainer of a seriously chilling horror story. We're talking about a quiet, completely normal night that suddenly flips into a desperate fight for survival. We're going to deconstruct an event that literally shattered the peaceful life of a young woman, and, more importantly, we'll see how a totally unintentional mistake can invite unimaginable terror right into your safe haven.
Picture this for a second. You're completely alone. The house is dead silent. And then, suddenly, a twisted, corrupted nursery rhyme echoes through the halls. Fish, fish, queen of the water, take her out and she will die. Before your brain can even process those words, you feel ice-cold hands, literally the hands of a little girl, tightening like a vice around your throat. It's this moment of sheer, breathless panic. Your mind is racing, your lungs are burning, and you realize, with absolute horror, that you're trapped in your own home with something monstrous.
So how in the world did a quiet night become a fight for survival? To figure out how our subject, Ivana, ended up in this terrifying climax, we actually have to jump back in time a bit. Let's look at the exact moment her reality began to fracture.
Now, Ivana is a 27-year-old housewife, and her life was, honestly, incredibly normal. Her 2 kids were away studying, her husband traveled a lot for work, so she was completely used to sleeping alone in their isolated house up in the hills. But you know that deep, silent isolation is exactly what made the sudden, jarring ringing of her doorbell at 12:30 in the morning so incredibly disturbing. Absolutely nobody visits at that hour.
The midnight visitor. A mysterious little girl at the gate, wearing torn, ragged clothes, unkempt, messy hair, holding an empty plastic bottle, crying and begging for water. When Ivana cautiously peeked through the gate, her visitor didn't look like a threat at all. She was crying, begging for water, saying she hadn't had a drop since morning. Naturally, Ivana felt a surge of pity, right? So she took the bottle, told the girl to wait, and went inside to fill it up. But when she got back to the gate just moments later, the kid had completely vanished into the pitch-black night.
The escalation of terror. At 12:30 a.m., the initial midnight knock. By 12:45 a.m., dismissing it and returning to sleep. And at 2 a.m., jolted awake by a foot hitting an entity. Leaving the water at the gate, a very tired Ivana just assumed it was some bizarre prank and went back to bed. By 12:45 a.m., she was fast asleep. The hills were dead quiet. But then, fast forward into the deep night. It's 2 a.m. Ivana rolls over in her sleep, and her foot abruptly bumps into something solid lying right next to her. Her eyes snap open, and just pure horror washes over her. Lying right beside her in the bed is the exact same ragged little girl from the front gate. But she wasn't crying anymore. No, the girl was staring right at Ivana and laughing maniacally. The sheer shock sent Ivana screaming, leaping out of bed in an absolute panic, while the girl immediately scrambled up and sprinted out of the room, heading straight for the kitchen. Now you'd think she'd run out the front door, right? But Ivana's fear actually mutated into intense anger. Like, how did this kid get into her locked house? Furious, she chased the girl down the hall to scold her. But the second Ivana stepped into the kitchen, she realized she had walked right into a trap. There was no girl hiding in the corners. Instead, a full-blown poltergeist attack kicked off, starting with the kitchen lights violently and aggressively flickering on and off. The visual assault of those strobe lights was instantly followed by a deafening, terrifying noise. Every single cupboard in the kitchen began violently flying open and slamming shut entirely on their own. Bang! 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 The whole room was literally vibrating with the chaotic energy of this unseen entity taking over the physical space. Ivana was left totally paralyzed with fear, just watching this impossible nightmare unfold.
And it wasn't just noise anymore. As the cupboards banged open, heavy pots and pans crashed to the floor. Then, in this terrifying crescendo of violence, a sharp kitchen knife shot out and flew right through the air, missing a frozen Ivana by mere inches. Make no mistake, the entity was actively trying to hurt her.
Then just as suddenly as it all started, the cupboards fell dead silent. The deafening banging just stopped, but the lights kept flickering. And in that eerie quiet, this new, sickening sound started coming from the kitchen sink. Thick, foul, pitch-black water began violently erupting and bubbling up from the drain, spilling over the edges. It completely defied all logic and sanitation. Just a dark, physical manifestation of the absolute evil in that room.
The sink attack. Step 1. Mocking laughter echoes from behind. Step 2. An invisible force violently yanks Ivana's hair. Step 3. Her hair gets hopelessly trapped in the sink drain. And step 4, her face is fully submerged in the suffocating black water. The attack suddenly turns incredibly personal and brutally physical. As Ivana is staring at this sludge, mocking laughter echoes from right behind her. Before she can even turn around, an invisible crushing force violently yanks her hair. She's dragged forward, her hair hopelessly pulled down into the very drain that black water's erupting from. Her face is forcefully submerged into the suffocating, foul sludge. She can't breathe. In a state of absolute blinding panic, Ivana uses literally every ounce of her strength to push away, actually tearing her own hair out by the roots just to escape the sink's deadly grip.
Collapsing onto the kitchen floor, gasping for air with her scalp burning in agony, Ivana realizes she is completely outmatched by whatever demonic force has invaded her home. She grabs her phone and immediately calls her husband. Hearing the sheer terror in his wife's voice, he realizes how grave the situation is and desperately urges her to abandon the house right that second. He tells her to flee to the neighbors while he sends help.
Ivana agrees. She prepares to run for her absolute life. But the exact moment she disconnects that call, that chilling, twisted nursery rhyme begins echoing through the house again. Fish, fish, queen of the water, take her out and she will die. Just like we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer, the ragged girl materializes, lunges, and wraps her freezing cold hands around Ivana's throat, violently strangling her.
The narrow rescue. Neighbors are alerted by Ivana's screams. A neighbor smashes the locked door open, the ghost instantly vanishes into thin air, and Ivana is left gasping with red marks on her throat. Just as Ivana's vision begins to fade to black, a literal miracle happens. The loud, chaotic screams from the attack had actually alerted the neighbors. They rushed over and one of them violently smashed the locked front door open. The very second they burst into the hallway, the demonic little girl instantly vanished into thin air. They found Ivana collapsed on the floor, desperately gasping for precious oxygen, with vivid, angry red marks bruised deep into her throat. She was, quite literally, seconds away from death.
Why was an innocent housewife targeted by this malicious entity? Now that the immediate, life-threatening danger has passed and Ivana is safe with her neighbors, we really have to pause and ask the big question. What actually invoked this terrifying haunting? Because, let's face it, poltergeists and demonic attachments don't just randomly appear to torture innocent people in the hills. There is always a trigger, an invitation, whether intentional or not.
Anatomy of an Anjaani Bhool, or unknown mistake. 1. A family vacation in the hills a week prior. 2. Ivana accidentally steps on an abandoned ring. 3. She unknowingly brings the cursed object home. And 4. The ring mysteriously vanishes, but the demonic attachment remains. The source of all this horror was actually triggered an entire week earlier during a family vacation. While out walking, Ivana had accidentally stepped on an abandoned ring lying on the ground. Without really thinking much of it, she picked it up and brought it back to her house. Well, by the very next morning, the physical ring had mysteriously vanished from her hands. But the damage was already done. She had unknowingly brought a cursed object into her safe haven. And while the physical ring disappeared, the demonic attachment, the spirit of the ragged girl, remained firmly anchored to Ivana. In Hindi, this is called an Anjaani Bhool, an unknown mistake.
Shuddhikaran, a rigorous spiritual purification and cleansing ritual performed on a home or person to banish negative energies, curses, or demonic entities. Realizing the terrifying, supernatural nature of what had latched onto them, the family knew they couldn't just, change the locks or move away. The entity was attached directly to Ivana. So, to permanently sever this deadly connection, the family immediately arranged for a Shuddhikaran. This is a very rigorous spiritual purification ritual specifically designed to cleanse the space and banish the evil entity back to wherever it came from.
And thankfully, the intense spiritual intervention actually worked. The purification ritual successfully broke the dark bond created by that cursed ring. The dark energy was totally cleansed from the home, and that terrifying little girl with the ragged clothes and the mocking laugh, she was never seen by Ivana or her family ever again. Peace finally was restored to the house in the hills.
But as you can imagine, the psychological scars of that night definitely remain. Ivana's life was forever changed by something as simple as stepping on a random object on the ground. She learned a truly terrifying lesson about the unseen forces around us. And because of this, Ivana now prays every single night before she goes to sleep, specifically asking for forgiveness for any Anjaani Bhool, any unknown mistake she might have accidentally committed that day. So it leaves us with one final chilling thought. Have you apologized for your unknown mistakes today because you never truly know what you might have unknowingly invited into your home?